Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday morning's webinar series. I am Chloe Tetro. I am the health coach with Ready Care, and for today, we are going to be looking at identity-based habits, identity-based behaviours, and how who we believe ourselves to be actually has a massive impact on the habits that we undertake. And all of these habits accrue to how we spend our days, what we're moving towards, and conversely, what we're moving away from. So you might have heard of popular speaker called Simon Sinek. Synek. These great videos up on YouTube. So he's made gained quite a lot of popularity in the kind of management coaching, personal growth field through asking the question like, what is your why? Right. His book is It Starts With Why. What is your motivation? Where do you want to go with this? What are you hoping to pursue and why? And although why is a great leverage for motivation, and it's a huge part of what we chat about in these talks. There's actually a layer before that, and I would paraphrase the neuroscience coach Ramon David in saying it starts with who. Who do you believe yourself to be? So habits aren't just actions that we perform, they're reflections of who we believe ourselves to be at our core. There's that saying like, whether you believe that you can or can't, you're right. And like there's that type of truth rings true too. That type of truth rings true. Look, I'm just going to roll with it. With regards who we believe ourselves to be at our core. If you believe yourself to be XY person, you are more likely to have behaviors in line to reinforce that belief, which is what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to look at the neuroscience aspect of it, what is happening in your brain patterns and your decision making processes, and the neural networks that are kind of contributing to those types of behaviors, and really kind of giving yourself a bit of the power back, going, okay, I understand that this is what's happening. How do I leverage this to actually gain some self-awareness, some self-reflection around who it is I believe myself to be and how I can align my actions more congruently with that to make habits easier. Because a big takeaway for today, lads, and what you'll start to see as we go through this topic is the brain is conspiring to help you. It may not feel that way, but it is. And once we kind of feed it the information of who we believe ourselves to be, it really starts to believe that. It starts to make those types of habits a lot easier. So let's take a quick look first at the neural side, the brain, what is happening. So a lot of who we believe ourselves to be, and when you see the word belief or when you hear the word belief, understand that that is patterning. That is brain-based patterning. It's based on your experiences as a young person, how you made sense of the world, the meaning making that you've attached on particular scenarios and what they mean about who you are. When we're small kids and there's so much information out there, all roads lead back, may fain. What does this mean about me? And particularly what can happen is when there are experiences that we go through that may not particularly be pleasant, the brain goes, let's store this way stronger, let's imprint it, let's carve it into stone so that we don't repeat the things that made us feel uncomfortable. What can happen there is that negative beliefs about ourselves tend to stick a little bit more. Positive beliefs are written in sand. Negative beliefs are like carved out of stone on the side of a cathedral of our brain. And what's happening there is the brain is trying to protect you from, look, I felt really uncomfortable in that particular scenario. I must be not good at this, so I'm going to produce avoidant-based behaviors that will shield me from experiencing something like that again. I'll give you a real-world example before we get stuck in a little bit, because I know this can all seem a little bit abstract sometimes. So what I mean by that is I'll give you a real-life Chloe world example. I felt I was bad at maths, couldn't understand it when I was small. It made me feel embarrassed, made me feel a little bit of shame around other classmates. So I stamped it in my head. I'm bad at maths. I'm not good with numbers. I'm more of a creative person, language, art, which is, fair enough. I had more of an aptitude towards those things. So Instead of thinking, this is something I could potentially work on, this is something I can start to get better at, I had the belief, I probably still do a little bit, if I'm to be perfectly honest, I'm not good with numbers. So taking that as one of my baseline fundamental patterns going into my adolescent and adult life, I was way more likely to have behavior type and avoidant type behavior avoidant type behaviors going into anything to do with numbers, going into anything to do with maths, monies, schedules, time, anything to do like that. So what started to happen is I started to create habits and avoidant type of habits that mimicked the fundamental belief that I had about who I was, and my behaviors in turn reflected that. So difficulties with all of the aforementioned areas of life, and difficulties that may not necessarily have been warranted, so that's really what we're going to look at in this little section. So at the forefront of all of this is the name forefront prefrontal cortex. He's always there. It's particularly the vendometrial and dorsolateral segments of the prefrontal cortex will play a role in integrating personal values, emotional responses, and rational thinking. Those are all elements that contribute to that kind of tapestry of our identity. When we make decisions, it's that part of the brain that weighs our options in light of who we are and who we aspire to be. So it's where our sense of self meets our actions and guides our behaviors to align with that identity that we believe ourselves to have in the first place. So it's neuroscientific research, like the work of, I love his name, Dr. Antonio Damasio. I don't know why, but I feel it's a brilliant name. It highlights the interplay between emotional and rational thinking in the prefrontal cortex. So his work on somatic markers hypotheses, which is a mouthful, suggests that emotional processes, how we react, or bias behavior, particularly in decision making. So the theory will imply that our identity, shaped in part by our emotional experiences, influences our choices at a neurological level. So that's that kind of avoidant behaviors for maths for me. Who we believe ourselves to be and our emotional processes of, that was unpleasant, I don't want to go near that, that made me feel shame and silly and all these kind of things. It starts to create unconscious bias behavior towards something. So habit formation also involves a place in the brain called the basal ganglia, which that area is more responsible for the development of automatic behaviors or habits. So most of what we do, this could be shocking to most people and very not surprising to others, but most of what we do during the day is actually part of that automatic behavior. We start to do particular behaviors without really thinking about them. And all of a sudden we're stuck in particular patterns. When a behavior is repeated frequently, it actually becomes ingrained in the neural pathways of the basal ganglia. So it becomes easier and easier for your brain to get to that particular point. It goes, this is the signal we're following. These are the behaviors we're going to do along with it. Once these habits are formed, you can either reinforce them or they can, they would either reinforce your sense of identity or conflict with the identity that your prefrontal cortex has already curated. So the prefrontal cortex will go, I am bad at maths, and the basal ganglia will either go, these are the habits we've started. Oh, we're just going to push that letter down because it's starting to talk about accounts and, oh, they're scheduling things. We'll just put that later on for today. Or it'll conflict with that. For instance, a disconnect might arise when habitual actions don't particularly reflect a sense of perceived self-identity, leading to cognitive dissonance. So I'll give you another real-world example, and this is one that I would see a lot with clients that I speak to, where they'll say, gosh, Chloe, I'm really on board with making these lifestyle dietary changes, but for whatever reason, I get in from work and I feel like I've no time, and I'll say, okay, what's happening with your time? They'll go, I'll just sit on the couch and I'll be scrolling Instagram for hours. And that's just kind of a habit I've gotten into. And I associate it with, I go in the door, I sit down. Once I'm sat down, I take out my phone. Once I have my phone out, I get all the dopamine hits. What's happening there essentially is a new habit has been formed where as soon as the person goes in the door, they sit on the couch. And that reinforces the rest of the habit. The phone comes out, Instagram comes out, dopamine hits, or Candy Crush, or whatever it may be. So there's an individual going, I know I really want to do this lifestyle dietary changes. I've set aside some time to take the dog for a walk. But as soon as I get in the door, I find myself spending hours. I'd say 2 or 3 hours could go on being on the couch, and I feel like it's very difficult to break. And the reason why it's difficult to break is because those neural pathways have been reinforced in the basal ganglia. So the person has a sense of identity of, I want to do X, Y, and Z, but their actual automatic behaviors are still stuck in that kind of habit patterning. And that's where that phrase of cognitive dissonance comes. On the other side, when our habits align with our identity, that the prefrontal cortex thinks of as ourselves, there's what's called neural coherence. Neural, come in for your dinner. Neural coherence, and that can reinforce our sense of self. So those habits become more ingrained. So on the flip side, let's say somebody was having a really, really stressful, burnt out period of time, and they said, look, Chloe, I just want to do nothing. I want to be somebody who can leave their work at work and come home and give themselves 2 hours and allow themselves to do nothing for 2 hours. In that particular case, somebody coming in the door and going, I'm going to go on the couch, I'm going to take out my phone, and I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm going to allow myself to do nothing for those 2 hours. For that person, that has a whole different meaning, with who they believe themselves to be, and how that's reinforcing what they want to work towards becoming. They want to work towards becoming somebody that allows themselves, quote unquote, that amount of time to just take a brain holiday. So that's kind of a silly example, but different behaviors can either move us towards who we want to be or away from who we want to be, is the kind of major takeaway from that. So what are identity-based habits? How are they formed? Dum, dum. So as with anything in the brain, in personal development and psychology, the concept of identity-driven habits is actually a lot more popular now than it would have been, and that's because we're able to actually look at the brain, where we have all these different imaging technology that we wouldn't have had, even 10 years ago, which is brilliant. Habits are deeply intertwined with our sense of self and formed and reinforced through psychological patterns that we spoke about. They can be called habit loops, and they consist of 3 elements. You have your cue, I'm coming in the door, I'm sitting on the couch, the routine, and the reward. So the routine being I'm scrolling through Instagram. The reward, most of the time with most habits, is dopamine. It's little brain chemicals that we find absolutely delicious. So the habit will begin with a cue, a trigger that sets the habit in motion. This is often linked to an aspect of our identity. For instance, a person who, I'm talking about positive habits here, caveat. A person who identifies as health conscious might be prompted by the sight of their runners. So that's the cue. To go for a jog, that's the routine. The reward for them will be that feeling of vitality and adherence to their self-image as a fit, healthy individual. Yes, they'll take on the day, they quote unquote smashed it, all this kind of stuff. So that reward reinforces the habit, and it makes it more likely to be repeated because it resonates with that person's sense of identity. When those habits are congruent or in sync with our identity, they tend to be just easier. They're easier, they're more durable, they're more sustainable, they're more satisfying for us because they feed our sense of self. I think that's one of the popular methods of quitting smoking, as far as I remember, is telling yourself you're a non-smoker. I'm not a smoker. Same for drinkers, whatever it may be. As soon as we tell ourselves, I am, the brain will try its best to make sure that you're right, which can be leveraged very, very simply, over the course of incremental moves towards that. That alignment makes us feel a sense of authenticity in our actions, which makes it feel way less like a chore and more like a natural extension of who we are. Um, Another example would be taking like a successful entrepreneur, for example, whose identity is closely tied to being disciplined and innovative. So that's who they believe themselves to be. That's how they would describe themselves on a dating app or to their coworkers. For them, a routine of early morning brainstorming sessions aligns perfectly with who they believe themselves to be. And that for them is fulfilling and conducive to their success. It's a brilliant habit. They've reinforced, they're like, yeah, this is who I am. Go for my 5 a.m. run, cold shower, Wim Hof, do my brainstorming. Um, and again, you see it on the flip side. If the habits clash with our sense of identity, it can lead to internal conflict and often are much more difficult to maintain long term. That dissonance can result in a lack of motivation. Why don't I feel like going for a hike? Well, maybe I'm afraid of heights, and that was that was an odd goal to set myself. Eventually, it more often than not becomes abandonment of the particular habit because it's hard. You're going on an uphill battle, not just when you're going on a hike to do. The significance of identity-driven habits extends beyond just routine actions. They shape our long-term behaviors, and all of these add up to become our life trajectory. Where are we going in our life? Are we following habits that make us feel rubbish, unmotivated, like everything is an uphill battle? Or are we going to follow habits that are more in line with who we choose to be, things that come naturally to us, things, if you like exercise that's spiritual, yoga might be a better suit for you than rowing, although, rowing can probably be a spiritual activity if that's the way you think. But it just makes sure that there's a level of consistency in our behaviors that contributes to a more fulfilling and authentic life experience. Things can challenge us. Yes. Get yourself out of the comfort zone. Yes. But if things feel like a slap in the face over and over and over, trying to do that while consistently feeling that slap in the face is like, what's that thing, the definition of madness, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. If things are not working for you, change them. Go a route that's easier for you, go a route that's more natural for you, whatever that may look like in your own life. So let's have a quick look at beep, 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 practical applications. It's my little theme song between. So how do you find out what is for you and not for you? Having a look at identity assessments, which is a critical aspect for aligning habits with core personal values and beliefs. This alignment will come from really giving yourself that time to actually give yourself a very honest look at who you were, what you enjoy, where you want to go, who you want to be, etc., etc. So when you're in alignment, that's known as identity congruence, and it's a key factor in effectiveness in sustainable habit formation. So self-reflection and identity assessment is the first step in leveraging identity for habit formation. It involves taking some time to introspect and really understand what matters to you. What are your core values, your beliefs, your aspirations? Journaling is a hugely beneficial step here. I'm a big fan of just writing because I could be thinking about things till the cows come home, and the cows will never come home. I will be cowless. Whereas if I just take 5 minutes to write some things out, it distills all of these thoughts, these abstract, murky things into this is a word, this is a sentence, I can work with that. I find it a great tool. Lots of people find it a great tool. Give yourself, maybe, if you've never tried it, just whip out a notepad and just really ask yourself the questions. The motor function of writing it out as well allows you to kind of take in and assimilate and activate your prefrontal cortex a little bit more when you're asking yourself these questions. Daily journaling to track thoughts and behaviors can be good, but really just giving yourself, that period of time and say, what are my core values? What's really important to me? When you have a clear sense of who you are and what your values are, It means creating habits that don't just resonate with who you are, but also helps you to express and strengthen your identity. For example, creativity being a core part of your identity, for example. Incorporate a daily habit of giving yourself an out into that creativity, or find yourself a goal that could be a fitness goal. And you say, okay, I hate the gym. It's not creative enough for me. It's prescriptive. I don't like lifting the heavy weight, putting the weight down. I'm very creative. I like to express myself. Maybe something like a dance class could be, more in line with who you are. You're going to have more fun. You're going to move your body. You're going to laugh loads, and you get to practice at home, listen to music. I'm going on a little bit, but in essence, it's just about finding those things. I'd be totally opposite. Give me a regiment. Have I done the thing? I've done the thing. Fantastic. I feel great about it. That's me done. um, the habit formation aspect of it is when the habits are congruent with your identity, they feel more natural. They feel less imposed. And when things are imposed, part of you is a 5-year-old who loves to stamp their foot and go, I'm not doing it. Even if you want to do it. If somebody feels like something is coming from the outside, there's an internal locus of control. That's when you control what you want to do. You want to do the thing. As soon as the words, I should be doing this, comes out of your mouth, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. That feels more like something outside is telling you to do something. And oftentimes when people say the words, I should be cleaning the house, I should be going to the gym, I should be eating better, they're not saying the words I want to. And part of the internal driver is that rebellious little child is going to stick their foot down and go, no, not doing it. That intrinsic motivation is far more powerful than any extrinsic motivation. If you care a lot about the environment, you're going to find things like recycling a lot easier. You're going to find things like taking the bus a lot easier. It's going to be way more in harmony with your identity. Getting your extra steps that way is going to make more sense to you than going to the gym and using a treadmill and going, jeepers, how much energy is this using? So it's a lot of these different types of examples come in. So setting identity-based goals, habit stacking. So habit stacking is basically when you link a new habit to an existing one that's already a part of your identity. For example, if you identify as a learner, I'm a lifelong student. Those kind of things. Stack a new habit of listening to educational podcasts during your morning routine on a topic that you are looking to learn more about. If you want to learn more about healthy eating, but you're not too sure where to go, but you love learning, stick on the podcast and let that kind of seep in as you're going through. Or as you're going for a walk. I love learning new things. I never have quite enough time to learn about ancient Greece. That's where I'm going with this. Give yourself a habit stack of going, gosh, I actually can give myself a half an hour every day where not only am I going for a walk, but I get to listen to my podcast that goes through the ins and outs of car mechanics, which I've wanted to learn about for ages. Community engagement is basically where you align with somebody that shares your values. And that's a very, very good social reinforcement for anything that you want to do. So that's kind of the ins and outs. It's making sure that what you choose to do is congruent with who you want to be. Now, if you know that your habits are currently reflecting a version of yourself that you're not particularly happy with, that's okay. That's totally okay. Just know that your basal ganglia is operating on autopilot, has all these little habits that it does every day on autopilot. And you might say to yourself, I don't want to be the type of person that just goes on the couch all day. Realize that it's not just a failing. It's not a failing on who you are. It's just this automatic behaviors, and you can change that. It is difficult in the beginning stages to change a habit. And there can be setbacks with all of that. There absolutely can. There needs sometimes to be reflect and adjust periods. But if you can make sure that the habits that you undertake, the goals that you set yourself, move you more towards who you want to become, who you believe yourself to be. And when you talk to the brain in present tense, because the brain doesn't understand at one stage, I want to be somebody who exercises. It'll just read that as that's down the line. We don't have to worry about this. If you say, I am someone who exercises, I am someone, if your core value is health, if your core value is I say mine all the time, freedom. I want to have the freedom to not feel like I'm constrained by my body, giving out aches, pains, hips, knees, all of these kind of things. So to me, having autonomy of freedom towards my body and being able to go out into the world, that's hugely important to me. I love nature. So there, going for something like a nature walk with a friend who shares that is more likely to produce a level of exercise than deciding I'm going rowing, because I am deathly afraid of water. I'm deathly afraid of heights as well. So going hiking is never going to be in the cards for me. So that's an over-the-top example of setting yourself things that reinforce who you are. And you will find it is a lot easier, because the more you feed yourself, remember, the brain works through repetition. I am someone who looks after my body. I am someone who likes to exercise. I'm someone who enjoys exercising. The brain will take that message if it's repeated often enough, and it will make you feel correct. It'll start to adopt behaviors that are a lot easier for you with it. So I've gone on now. I've gone on a fair while. So hopefully you guys found something helpful in that. If you are looking for some further resources, I'll just do a quick recap, actually, just with regards to what we went through. So brain-based, prefrontal cortex and basal ganglia, they both operate towards helping you create a sense of identity and the habits involved in it. So the brain structure intertwines with our identity to form habits. We look at the significance of aligning our habits with our core values and identity, underscoring the importance of congruence in habit formation for personal growth. If you guys are interested in learning more about this, I would go to Atomic Habits by James Clear, great book. The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, Duhigg. And there's lots of really brilliant talks on YouTube. There's a book that I think everybody should read if they're into personal development. It's called Transcend by Barry Scott Kaufman. It is brilliant. It's one of my favorite books out there. So that is me for today. Long talk. And I'll see you guys. No, next week, Andrew will be here with a talk on female hormones, which is great. Absolutely brilliant. And I'll be in the week after on a chat around how to stay on track around the Christmas period. Right. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.